All right, Sally, it is so great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm a huge fan of the show, so I'm glad to be here.
So Sally, of course, co-hosts the Smart Travel podcast. Make it a regular appointment weekly on Wednesdays.
That's correct. Thank you.
Sally, there's a lot to talk about as we sort of wind down summer travel season here, head into fall. People already booking if not already booking, definitely looking at their winter locations, their winter break locations.
Yes, you definitely should be looking. NerdWallet recommends booking domestic travel 1 to 3 months in advance. So really now is that sweet spot to start looking at where you're going to go for Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Wait, so it's only 1 to 3 months? I've heard varying recommendations. I heard 50-something days out, and then some people have suggested domestic versus international changes. What is the rule of thumb? And does it even matter these days? Because I feel like all those cookies and the websites are tracking you. Are there still deals to be gotten, and does timing matter?
Yeah, so NerdWallet says 1 to 3 months for domestic and then 2 to 8 months for international, but that's just kind of a general guideline and there are always outliers. So if you do book travel too early, especially with airlines, they're kind of counting on the eager beavers who they will just pay whatever because they know they want to go on that trip and they'll book super early to lock it in.
Oh, so like now we record this in August of 2025. If you know next August where you're going a year out, you say, Sally, don't book it yet.
Don't book it yet. They want to capitalize on the eager beavers. There are some exceptions, and that is if you really want to guarantee that you want to get that seat. Some people say I must have the front row aisle seat, something like that. You need to book early. And then also if you are booking on points, most airlines will release their points availability 11 months out. So now would be the time to start thinking about summer travel next year if you're booking on points, particularly if you want to book one of those premium point seats. That's a seat in business or first class. Availability is so limited for that. But for that general traveler who is just saying, I want to book an economy class seat, I'm paying cash, even paying points, do not worry about summer travel now for the next year. What I would say is set an alert. There are so many good tools like Google Flights where you can set fare alerts. And Google has all the data. You don't need to find the data yourself. Let Google do the work. And they will actually alert you if fares are lower than average. And that would be the good time to book.
Curious, are you using AI? How reliable is ChatGPT and the various AI platforms when it comes to travel recommendations? I've heard some people trying to use it to get the best deals. Are they effective?
Yeah, I think AI is a good sort of general planning tool. And then from there, kind of jump off, do your own research. What you have to realize with AI is just mining the web for other information. And so it's using another travel blog to come up with some itinerary, but you don't know, is that travel blog out of date? And especially with travel, we see this so often where maybe a hotel used to be owned by Hyatt and now it's owned by Hilton and you have Hyatt points. So you might think, oh yeah, AI told me to book at this, hotel, but it's now no longer in your points brand. That happens more often than you would think. And so often I will say, hey, I am going to Europe and I want you to plan this itinerary based on what airport I'm flying in and out of. Tell me which trains to take. Tell me which route to go. But from there, you do have to confirm it yourself.
Yeah. And by the way, nightmare story that popped recently, a travel influencer tried to use ChatGPT for visa information.
Oh,
and then apparently that was outdated and they actually arrived at the place not thinking they needed a visa or they had different rules. New rules went into effect and effectively they couldn't enter the country.
Oh my gosh, yes. And especially it does seem like visa rules are changing frequently. The only way to guarantee that you are doing it right is to go on the official website. That is a .gov website telling you the visa rules. Even I see so many people make this mistake where they'll go to a website that looks semi-legit. It'll just be like europevisa.com and they'll say, oh yes, of course europevisa.com is legit. And there might be some sort of scam involved where they say, pay us a bunch of money and we'll get you some visa that's way more expensive than if you had just done it directly through the .gov website. So no matter what, don't rely on ChatGPT. Don't rely on some random europevisa.com. You need to use the .gov website for that final verification.
All right. So we got into some details there. I want to start broad strokes here.
Yes.
We're, just past the midway point. We're wrapping up summer. What have been the top headlines for you, Sally, as you've been watching both domestically, internationally, and we'll begin with Americans and how they've been traveling?
Yes, this has been such an interesting year for travel. What we are finding is that spending on travel is down, prices for travel is down. In fact, this was the first year that we actually saw a decline in spending since February 2021. And so we're also seeing that prices are down.
Wait, so when we talk about spending down, we're talking about overall spending?
Spending on travel, yes.
Yeah, but it does feel like the prices themselves are still very high.
Well, this is kind of shocking. Actually, what NerdWallet found is that year over year hotel room rates are down about 5%. And then we are also finding airfares are mostly flat over the past year. Rental car rates are mostly flat over the past year. And you have to figure that overall prices are up nearly 3% year over year. That's just general inflation. So to see airline prices, rental car prices mostly flat, hotel prices down, I think says a lot about the state of travel.
And that's from peak. Like last year would have been peak prices, or close to peak.
We saw pretty close to peak prices in terms of some travel expenses, but the biggest one is airline expenses. I got to tell you, a lot of people think air travel is more and more expensive, but NerdWallet tracks travel prices and airfares are down over the past 10 years. They are down nearly 17%.
Really?
Yes, I know. And that is the wildest fact. Because over the past 10 years, general prices for everything we buy is up 35%. So to see airfares down nearly 17% also says a lot about the state of travel.
So that's prices. But as far as the people who were still traveling and spending, what were they spending on? Where were they going? What types of trips?
Yeah, so we are seeing quite a range in terms of where people are going. We still see people doing those big bucket list vacations. And I think that's a holdover of people during COVID saying, I need to do my safari this year. I need to do my Antarctica trip. But what we are seeing more and more of is trips that are really easy to plan. We are seeing multi-generational trips. And to me, the definition of that is something like cruises. Cruises are having a hot moment this year because everything you pay for upfront, it's easy to budget because you just know you paid for it. And then if you're doing a multi-generational trip, everyone can be on the cruise, do their own thing. You can bring the
grandparents, you can bring the kids, you can bring everybody.
Absolutely. So that's one of the wild trends we're seeing, generally just all-inclusives. A lot of big hotel brands are investing in all-inclusives. So not necessarily cruises, but kind of like a cruise on land. Hyatt has a massive growth in their all-inclusive portfolio. So that's an interesting trend. I think people want travel that's just easy to plan and easy to budget for.
When it comes to international destinations, my wife and I were among those who went to Japan this summer, and we saw that, at least according to one study, that Tokyo surpassed Paris this year as the number 2 destination so it goes London, and then number 2 for years was Paris, and then Tokyo surpassed that this year.
Yes, a lot of people kind of jumped on the Japan craze because the dollar was so strong for Americans going to visit Japan. So a lot of people said, you know what, we got to do it. But what's interesting is that it was strong for a lot of aspects of travel in Japan, maybe things like food. But Japan actually did not have a ton of hotel inventory or employees to staff those hotels. So what Americans were actually finding is, hey, I got this cheap flight to Japan. They're saying things are cheap in Japan, but you know what? Hotels are actually really expensive just because of that basic supply and demand challenge.
That's so interesting. Yeah, a couple of the hotels we stayed at, some of the staff members of the hotel were very much struggling with their English.
Yeah. That's an interesting point. Some countries, it is easier to find people who speak English than others. I will say, if you want to go to Southeast Asia, a place like Thailand or Vietnam, you can really easily find amazing deals. And people in the tourism industry do speak English for the most part there really well. So that's still one of my favorite places to get a deal if you want to go to Southeast Asia.
I know that the trend line in recent years, if you just look at your Instagram page, is Southern Europe, right? The Portugals, the Spains, the Greeces, the Italys. Did that remain the case this summer, or were people seeking out, different destinations?
Yeah, people are very price conscious. And if you want to go to Europe, typically those places are a lot cheaper than going to Northern Europe. Your Norway, Sweden, Finland is going to be super expensive. Iceland, so many people get seduced by a cheap airfare deal to Iceland, but everything is so expensive once you're there.
Oh, so even with the surge of prices in Italy, you can still find deals there?
Yeah, Italy is is an interesting one, especially this year because it's a Jubilee. Italy is a little bit trickier to find those deals just because you're competing with a lot of people. But if you want to find the deals, it really involves going to some of the more off the beaten path places, talking about those Croatias of the world. That's kind of a place, even Greece, where you can get the better deals.
Let's talk the reverse here. People coming to America, that's been a huge storyline of late, particularly the Canadians deciding not to come south of the border due to tariffs and the variety of things that have unfolded here over the past few months. Also, Europeans and other folks conscious or worried about what could happen at the border with, the new scrutiny at Customs and Border Patrol. What have we been noticing stateside when it comes to foreign tourists coming here, and then also just Americans traveling closer to home?
Yes. So we are definitely seeing a lack of foreign tourists coming into the U.S. We have some interesting data from the National Travel and Tourism Office that foreign tourism is up 6.5% from 2024, but it is still down from the number of foreign tourists who came in 2019. So we're still not at those pre-COVID levels. One really interesting data point is I was reading Disney's second quarter earnings report. And they said international attendance at the domestic parks is still not back to their pre-COVID levels. They're saying that they're making up for it with domestic attendance. But I think of Disney as being such a microcosm of what tourists are doing. And the fact that international tourists are not back at Disney is specifically really interesting. Again, you mentioned Canada. And so I said tourism is up from international tourists since 2024, but Canada is an exception. Canada tourism is down 8.3% year over year. A lot of those Canadians are saying, let's just go a little farther south. Let's go to Mexico instead of something like Florida or Southern California. The good news is that if you are an American traveling in the US, you can benefit from not having to compete with prices from those foreign tourists. I mentioned Disney, and the deals that they've been offering this summer are unbelievably good. That's how they are making up for it, is getting Americans in with those deals.
Is there an ideal time to book Disney? I mean, there's various stories. If you're, a family of four, family of five, I mean, Disney with the various passes and that can still be a several $1,000s vacation.
Yes. So Disney is one of those trips that you actually do want to plan farther out. I talked about, planning your flights 1 to 3 months in advance. But if you need to guarantee that aisle seat in the front row, you need to book earlier than that. Disney is like that times 10. With Disney, you need to book your tickets. You need to book your dining reservations if you want to eat at a specific restaurant. You can purchase the lightning lanes, which are kind of like this expedited line pass. And if you're staying at those hotels, you get to book those early. And all of that, you want to pick the window as soon as possible. So something like Disney, you do need to book as early as possible.
All right. So we're wrapping up summer here. We're heading to Labor Day, Thanksgiving, winter break. What are your top tips for people in terms of what they should be doing, where they should be going this fall and winter?
So one of the things that you should do is at least just set those price alerts. So if you're someone who has a specific destination in mind, you say, for the winter, we want to go to Hawaii, then set the price alerts. And then from there, be flexible. What a lot of people don't realize is that there can be hundreds of dollars of difference in price just by adjusting your trip by one day. So I think about something like Labor Day even coming up. Everybody on the planet wants to fly back on that Monday of Labor Day to take advantage of the long weekend. If you can extend your trip by one day, sure, you have to pay an extra day of a hotel room, but often you will more than make up for that in the flight savings. I was looking at flights to the Caribbean for Labor Day, and flying out on the Tuesday versus the Monday was like $500 difference, times that by your whole family. And so I would say, especially when you go into the other holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas, do you need to fly out on, the day before Thanksgiving on that Wednesday, or can you extend and stay with your family a little longer?
Or I have found, Sally, flying that Thursday morning of Thanksgiving.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That's the best tip. And you know what? I think people are way nicer if you're at the airport on Thanksgiving on Thursday. Like everyone's chill. On Wednesday, people are not chill. Yeah. I love that tip. And you know what I would say? Fly out the first flight of the day because early flights are significantly less likely to be canceled than later flights because it's this snowball effect of often one flight is delayed for whatever reason because they couldn't fit the bags in the overhead bin. And then that just snowballs all the other flights on the same aircraft that day. So if you board that earliest flight, least odds of getting delayed. And then you're home in time for Thanksgiving dinner.
And the crew typically overnights in that city, so you won't have a crew issue.
Right.
And typically the plane overnighted at the airport.
Yes, so it's there.
The first flight of the day. So the plane is there, the crew is there. So, I mean, that cuts down on two of the potential issues that you typically face with delays.
I agree. It is brutal to have to wake up at 3 a.m. for the flight, but I promise it is not as brutal as dealing with a potential long cancellation or delay.
Especially if you're a parent, kids at the airport, delays. It's a lot to deal with. And that's one of the things, honestly, as I think about, as a new parent, our daughter turns 2 in September.
Oh, amazing.
It's just how family unfriendly so many airports are.
Yes, we are seeing some airports really are better than others and are becoming more kid friendly and more family friendly, more delay friendly. I got to say, San Francisco, that's my home airport, is the best airport on earth. There is so much space to spread out, to take a nap. The couches are actually comfortable. They're not like the ones that like wedge into your back and you're like, what body was this built for? No bodies.
So you give SFO 2 thumbs up as a family.
Oh my gosh, all the thumbs up for SFO.
In terms of specific deals you're seeing, locations, if you're not going to be spending Thanksgiving with grandma and grandpa at their house or Christmas time, are there certain places you're looking at that you think Americans should be thinking about?
Yes. Some of the tourist destinations are still not back to their pre-COVID levels. I'm thinking about a place like Hawaii. People want to spend their cold Christmas out there in Hawaii. So that's a really good place to go to get deals.
You can still get a deal for Hawaii, like Christmas, New Year's time?
Deal is relative. Relative to what it would have been pre-COVID. We'll say that. So Hawaii is still absolutely most expensive during Christmas time. But if you ever want to spend a Christmas in Hawaii, now would be a great year to do that. Other places we're seeing that didn't quite get the tourist uptick that maybe they thought was, I mentioned Disney, Las Vegas, also a great place to go to escape the cold. So those are places where you can get deals because they sort of anticipated this huge influx of visitors. They really built up a lot of hotel space. So there is a ton of supply. So you can capitalize on your deals that way.
We talked a lot about airlines. Curious when it comes to booking car rentals and hotels, those categories, timing, vetting them. What's your suggestion?
So one of the good things about a lot of hotels and rental cars is that they do not make you pay up front. There are some that do demand upfront payment, but that's rather uncommon. Or what we'll see is if you pay up front, it's slightly cheaper, but it'll be like 2% cheaper than paying at the front desk. So one of the things that NerdWallet actually does recommend with hotels and rental cars is if you see a reservation you like at a price you are willing to pay, go ahead and book that now. Particularly if you're booking with points, hotels will have a limited number of rooms available for points bookings and then the rest for cash. So if you do want to book in points, just lock it in. Here's what we see is most hotel and rental cars have very generous cancellation policies that you can cancel, no strings attached. Typically, there will be some sort of maybe 48-hour in advance cancellation policy. So just lock it in now because you don't want the availability for that best hotel to go away. I was just looking at hotels for next month and the one I wanted was sold out. Darn it, I didn't plan in advance. There was another one 2 miles away, but that's not as good as the one I wanted. So if you really want to have maximum flexibility, get the hotel you want, you should just make that reservation early and then change it if you need to.
Any tips when it comes to where to get the best reviews and sense of hotels? Because those hotels can be misleading sometimes in terms of the photos they put up.
Yes.
And then even like trying to like go to a TripAdvisor or those sites, like it's very hard to glean, was that 0-star rating deserved by that person? Or are they just, complaining about something that would not be important to you?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I always say I read the 3-star reviews because I still like human reviews, but I always feel like the 1-star review is like a little bit unhinged versus like
those are the people who you feel like give 1 star to everything, right?
Oh my gosh.
They're just perpetually unhappy.
My friend owns an Airbnb and someone gave him a negative review because they thought the cutting boards were too small. And I was like, oh my gosh. gosh, this poor guy. So now his Airbnb has like every cutting board of every size. And I'm like, you can't take a review like that seriously. It's like, come on, cutting boards are cutting boards. But, I often feel like the 3-star reviews might have some practical advice. So definitely read the reviews. Definitely look at the photos, because the photos that the hotel puts up are never like what they actually look like. So, there are websites like even, Google reviews I find to be very valuable. Yelp can generally be valuable. A photo can tell you so much about the quality. So definitely do your research, especially in this era of AI generated photos.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know.
And AI generated reviews.
And that, exactly. So that's again where I just say, you really do need to go in and read the reviews and look for the ones that are real.
You mentioned Airbnb there. Obviously, that's an alternative many people look at, especially if you're a family and you're looking, a hotel isn't going to work for you. Any tips when it comes to Airbnb, but also I think Vrbo is the alternative when it comes to rental cars as well.
Yes, and there are so many other rental companies as well. A lot of people just say Airbnb, and I'm guilty of this. As
right, Airbnb has sort of become the Google for...
right. Yeah. It's like the catch-all. It's like the Kleenex for any sort of tissue is what I call an Airbnb. But we are finding there are so many companies that are getting into the vacation rental space, because a lot of what I was saying, people want to travel with families, these multi-generational trips. You want all the squad under the same roof. You want the conveniences of laundry and a kitchen maybe. And so vacation rentals are popular, but what we found with Airbnb is there is so much variability of, is the host going to be easy to work with? How do I check in? Do I need to talk to a person? Is there a keypad? Does a keypad function? It's all very stressful, especially when you're going to the checkout. Do I need to take out the trash? Do I need to start the laundry? What is going on? It is chaotic, and a lot of people have become turned off by this lack of consistency with Airbnb. But what we're finding is more and more hotel programs are creating their own vacation rentals, or they're partnering with vacation rentals. So I was actually just in Florida at this huge vacation rental resort. It's called Reunion Resort. And the homes themselves are owned by regular people, but most of the homes are actually managed by the company called Reunion, which makes it really convenient because the check-in process is consistent. It's just a keypad. If you have an issue like the lights go out or, something goes wrong, they can immediately contract out to someone who comes in and fix the light versus, a regular host might say, I live in a different state. I can't fix your light or fix your toilet. And then the checkout process is very simple. You don't need to mess around with the host's individual rules of taking out the trash, because Reunion Resort manages that all for you. And then these vacation rentals are bookable on Marriott Homes and Villas, so you can use your Marriott points. They're bookable on Amex Travel, so you can use those Amex points. So we're finding more and more availability to use points to book vacation rentals, and vacation rentals that are professionally managed. I actually saw a data point that the majority of Airbnbs now are professionally managed, because we're finding travelers want that consistent experience.
But how about the cutting boards?
Oh, the cutting boards! I know it's stressful. So, no. I think that I stayed at the Reunion Resort, and the cutting boards were excellent. So.
Excellent cutting boards, 5 stars. So, one of the conversations, I mentioned this before we hit record here. How many credit cards do you have?
I have 18. So
18. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny. It's this myth that you should only have one credit card. Too many will hurt your credit score. But I'm the person who is always trying to apply for at least 4 credit cards a year. And then if they have annual fees I'm not using, I will downgrade the credit card. But a lot of people say it hurts your credit score to have too many credit cards, and that is absolutely a myth. There is a small, typically negative impact on your credit score when you apply for a credit card, but that is very quickly mitigated by you extend your credit limit. Typically, a credit card might give you, let's say, a $6,000 credit limit. And the thing is, my credit limit is over $100,000 at this point. I don't have $100,000 to put on my credit card, but your credit score is typically a huge portion of it is what amount of available credit you're using.
Right. Keep the balance low.
Yes. Yeah. And so my credit utilization rate is, I typically have, $1,000 outstanding on my credit cards in debt that I pay off every month. And my available credit is over $100,000. So my credit utilization rate is less than 1% at all times. And that is one of the best things you can do for your credit score is keep that credit utilization rate as low as possible. So having a huge credit line is one of the best ways to do that. Of course, you do need to pay off your credit cards in full every month to make that work.
So diving into credit cards here, one of the things that he mentioned was that this was the first year he didn't have specific elite status with one airline. What he's been liking lately, in particular, are cards like the Chase Sapphire, Amex, where you get these sort of generic points that you can then apply to a hotel or an airline of your choice, depending on where you're traveling. What's your opinion of that? And what's your recommendation to folks?
Yes, I have actually never earned hotel or airline elite status purely by stays alone. And that's saying a lot because I travel a lot. But the thing is, I always stay at the hotel or with the airline that is best for my schedule. And so sometimes that's a United flight, sometimes that's an Alaska flight, sometimes that's a Southwest flight. I prioritize the best deal, the one that doesn't have a layover, the one that's the best time for me. And I would never book a flight just to chase some elite status. The thing is, unless you really are traveling on expensive fares all the time, even the low level of elite status that you earn gets you something like priority boarding. I don't know about you, but I want to be the last person on the airplane. I want to spend as little time on that metal tube as possible.
Well, I just want to make sure I get on early enough to be able to put something in the overhead.
Yeah, people do on their overhead bins.
Yeah.
I'm such a light packer. I'm also 4'10", but I don't even use the overhead bins. I'm like, I don't want this.
You don't need the leg room. You can put everything under the seat.
Right. That's exactly right. So I do think it's a lot to chase this airline and hotel elite status, but with many of these credit cards, they will have perks that are similar to elite status perks without actually having it. So you mentioned the whole bag thing, and many airline credit cards, even those with relatively low annual fees in the $100 annual fee territory, will offer you a free checked bag. Sometimes they'll offer you a free checked bag for you and everyone on your itinerary.
So the annual fee pays for itself right there.
Absolutely. So a lot of people say, oh my gosh, why do you have these credit cards with super high annual fees? And it can easily pay for themselves if you're checking bags. We especially see this in the hotel space. And like cards like the Platinum card from American Express, they allow you to book through something called their Amex Fine Hotels and Resorts, where if you book one of these hotels, they'll give you things like early and late checkout. They'll give you dining credits. They'll give you free breakfast. They'll give you that space available room upgrade. And you don't necessarily need to have elite status. And so that's a way, if you're staying at a really fancy Kimpton, which is part of the IHG brand, you've never stayed at an IHG hotel before, you can still get that premium elite status. And that's by booking it through just a general travel credit card rather than one specific to, let's say, IHG.
So what travel credit cards are you liking right now? Do you have sort of a top 3, top 4 that you're into?
So I do have the Platinum card from American Express, and that
high annual fee though. What's the annual fee there?
Very high. I want to say it's $695.
$695 a year.
Yes, and so that one is definitely not for everyone. And I will say, before someone looks into one of these cards, it really comes down to all the benefits that you can use. And I think a lot of these fancy credit cards, like the Chase Sapphire Reserve, like the Amex Platinum, I call them bougie coupon books because they have these statement credits for specific brands that are bougie brands. So the Platinum card from American Express, as I've said, $695 annual fee. They have things like a $200 clear credit, a entertainment credit that's up to $20 in statement credits each month for things like Disney Plus, credits each month for Uber Cash.
So you just have to be very strategic in like looking at the benefits, and if done correctly, that annual fee will pay for itself.
Yes. And so, for me, my fiance is an Equinox member. So I give him, the Equinox credits, and that totally pays for itself when I factor in
There's Uber credits too, I think that they
the Uber credits I use. Yeah. But then, I think my parents live in Missouri. There is no Equinox in Missouri. They don't do Uber in Missouri. And so I say, and then, the airport lounge in St. Louis is terrible, I have to say. So for someone like them, I would say, do not worry about it. You don't need me this card. But in San Francisco, where there's, multiple equinoxes, we take Uber all the time. And then the Centurion Lounge in San Francisco is excellent. Every time I pray for a flight delay so I can spend more time in the Centurion Lounge.
You're alone. You're alone.
I'm like, it's a bonus espresso martini in the lounge. So that makes it really worth it. The Chase card is kind of similar in that they also have these bougie coupon book credits. I don't actually have the Chase Sapphire Reserve, but their card is also one of those kind of bougie coupon books. And they have an Apple TV credit, a Dash Pass credit, Lyft credits, Peloton credits. I am not a Pelotoner, but if you love Cody with Peloton, then, maybe the Chase Sapphire Reserve is a card for you. So you just have to kind of go in and say, does this bougie coupon book apply to my spending? And it may or may not.
Capital One also has a travel card that I've heard.
Yes. So the Capital One Venture X I actually also hold that card. What I like about the Venture X is that their credits are among the most flexible to use. So that card has a $395 annual fee, but they have just kind of this really easy to use $300 credit to redeem in the Capital One travel portal. And that eats out a huge chunk of the annual fee. Then they give you miles that also kind of really justifies the annual fee. What I like about that is it's kind of like this blanket travel credit versus Chase's is, to me, stressful to use because I'm like, did I use my Peloton membership this month? Did I use my Lyft credits? Did I use my StubHub credits? I love the Venture X because it's so simple.
Curious when it comes to utilizing those points, what that means for cancellation. I mean, are there positives? Are there negatives? And then how, it's always a stressful thing where you gain these points, these airline points or the points on the credit card. You're like, oh, am I ready to, I don't know. Is this trip worth 50,000 of my points? I don't know how many I'll have left. And when do you make the decision to use points versus, maybe there's a deal and you actually okay, I'm going to pay for that cash.
Yeah, it can be really stressful to know. So points do have a lot of value in that, particularly for premium class redemptions. That's the business, the first class, that it's almost always a much better deal to pay in points than to pay for it in cash. So I find that valuable. Often points have more flexible cancellation policies where you'll typically find that airfares booked on points, you can cancel them versus if you book on cash, it's more of a toss up whether or not you can cancel them. And you can do that pretty
close. I mean, I've heard people who they had a flight canceled and they, were supposed to connect to another flight. And because they booked that second flight on points,
yes,
they were able to call from the first airport being like, I'm not going to make it.
I'm a menace. If I have someplace I have to be, I'm a competitive weightlifter actually. And so I cannot miss a flight to a competition. I'll book multiple flights just to make sure that I can get on one and then I'll cancel the other one. And
you'll do it on points.
Yes. And typically points do allow you to do this. Again, check with your specific airline just to make sure that those points you can cancel. But that's almost always the case. However, what I will say is the best currency is the one that's the most fungible, and that is your dollars. Your Southwest points are not going to do a whole lot when it comes time to pay your rent. And so that's a case where I would say spend down your points as soon as possible. You really don't want to be sitting on points. Especially we don't know what's going to happen to these airlines. I'm thinking about everyone's talking about Spirit Airlines is going to die. And if Spirit Airlines dies, your points go with it. So you don't want to have a ton of money tied up in points. I talk to these people who say that I have 400,000 Chase Ultimate Rewards points and what do I do with them? Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh my gosh, if you just had that money in cash, you could do anything with that. You could invest it. Points, you can't invest. They don't accrue interest. And so one of the things I will say is don't wait for some phantom redemption. If you can just spend the points, just spend them.
So there's no threshold number that you recommend getting to or staying above. If you burn most of your points and you go from 150,000 points back down to 5,000 points, that's okay, everybody.
It's okay. I know there's so many people who have anxiety parting with points. And I would say,
I feel like I'm one of those people. I like to see that points number in the top right corner of my screen when I log in.
I know. And then there's also a lot of people who so NerdWallet values points every year. So we'll say a Hyatt point is worth on average 2 cents. And I would say, if you're getting a redemption that makes that Hyatt point worth 1 cent, maybe not. But there's a lot of people who are like, well, this redemption is worth 1.8 cents and NerdWallet says it's 2 cents. Like, am I getting a bad redemption? And I say, you know what, just spend it because you didn't part with any cash out of pocket. Save your cash to pay your rent, to invest it, to do whatever. And I think the returns you'll make by just investing it is so much better than waiting for some redemption. And then the other thing a lot of people forget is that real cash inflation obviously exists, but points inflation exists so much more. And I have been tracking credit card sign-up bonuses for many, many years now. And it seems like every year there's a best ever offer. It's 60,000 miles. It's 70,000 miles. It's 80,000 miles. It's always the best ever offer and it's more miles. And the airlines are not being more generous. They don't like us more this year. They are just inflating. So 80,000 miles this year is basically the same value.
It's getting you that same coach seat that 50,000 miles used to get you.
Right. I'm like, it's not the best ever offer. Come on. I mean, it is, but it's just not that much value.
I should mention nerdwallet.com if you Google NerdWallet points calculator, you guys provide a calculator that allows me to put in my airline, put in the cost of what the ticket would be, put in how many miles, and determine what the best deal is.
Yes. And so that's something that I always do when I'm booking on points. If I can see, look, the cash fare is $500, and then NerdWallet says that the points are worth something in that realm, $400 to $600, I would just say go ahead and book it. You're close enough.
Book it via points or book it via cash?
Just book it via points because I always say spend down your points is kind of the best way to go. Save your cash for anything else.
Anything else looking ahead to 2026? Places you're liking, trends you're seeing?
Yes. Well, one of the wildest trends I am seeing is the rise in luxury travel. I know we mentioned that spending is down, but this is something that I'm watching. Actually, both Hilton and Hyatt came out and said that revenue per room and occupancy for a room at their luxury brands was up. Meanwhile, revenue per room and occupancy at their budget brands is down, which is very odd to me when we're seeing this economic uncertainty. And I'm wondering why this is. In some ways, I do kind of wonder if it just kind of illuminates this class divide of the wealthier folk who can afford to stay at the Waldorf Astoria and they're not bothered by it. And maybe that really price sensitive family who would otherwise stay at a Hampton is not traveling at all or staying for free with friends and family.
It's also similar to what we've seen with the airlines for years, where the airlines make their money on business class.
Yes,
right?
Exactly right. And so that's definitely a trend to follow. I also just have to wonder in this ongoing Instagram culture where it feels like every other video is someone posting their amazing, overwater bungalow at the Waldorf in the Maldives, that are people kind of overextending to stay at that really fantastic resort because the Hampton Inn is just not that Instagrammable. So that is a trend that we're watching is a rise in luxury.
Anything Gen Z wise, generationally, how are they approaching travel different from the elder millennials?
Yeah, we are just seeing that increased spending on experiences, and that's where you see kind of, I think, a lot of interest in those fancy hotel brands. And in these very experiential things, we're also seeing lots of points redemptions for one-of-a-kind experiences, which is very interesting to Gen Z who they want to be that special experience. And so we're seeing especially brands like Chase and Amex are offering not just a way to spend your points at a hotel, but to get a one-of-a-kind experience. So this might be dinner at a restaurant with the celebrity chef, or it might be, going to Coachella and you get to book this exclusive VIP tent. And that's something that I think the younger people especially really want.
You mentioned on your Smart Travel podcast, you recently did an episode on packing tips.
Yes.
Sally, well, you've already mentioned your 410, so you can probably get everything you need to into a carry-on. But what are your tips for the overpackers out there, the people who are checking luggage, ways to optimize for packing these days?
It is easier for me to pack light because all my clothes are from the kids section, so they're smaller, they fit it everywhere. But my best single piece of packing advice is to follow the $10 rule, and it goes like this. If you can purchase something in your destination for less than $10 and in under 10 minutes, and it is a just in case item, I am talking about bug spray because you're not sure what the bug situation is. Maybe sunscreen if you're not sure you're going to go in the pool. You might be wearing a long sleeve, so you might not need it. An umbrella or a poncho because you're not sure it's going to rain. Do not pack it, especially if you're going to a place like a city. You can buy an umbrella anywhere at any CVS. Just get it upon arrival. Don't feel like you need to pack that thing.
Right. It's the places where you're like traveling to a resort where they're going to charge you $22 for sunscreen. That's when you,
Yes. Then, so I always say, and you know, the $10 rule, it can be flexible based on your own kind of situation. So I might say I'm willing to hike 20 minutes. So it's a $10 rule. Also, someone who maybe has a little bit more disposable income might say, you know what, actually, $100 rule is fine. I will just buy the expensive resort sunscreen and umbrella if I have to, because you don't want to be lugging that stuff through the airport. In turn, you save money by not having to pay that checked bag fee often, because that sunscreen, you probably have to check it. And then also you can just be more nimble. You don't need to worry about, you know, do I have to pay for a taxi because I have so much stuff to lug around? I always try to just do backpack only, and I can just hop on public transit. Allows me to check in and out of my room easier. Sometimes I'm just checking out and then I have 6 hours to kill until my flight, and I just walk around the city with my stuff because I pack light. I always say, do not try to stuff your suitcase to the max. Pack as light as you can, and I promise you will be happier.
You got to have options. You got to get your shoes and all the various outfits and all. Like, what advice do you give people beyond the 10-10 rule or 10-20 rule, or you know, whatever you've determined, how far you're willing to go or how much you'll pay for, you know, how much to pack for, you know, a typical vacation? I
try to pack as light as possible. I try to pack as little stuff. Buy the shoes that match with anything. So just like the simple color. And I know it's so hard. Everyone wants to look cute on Instagram and have different outfits every single day. You know, I was just on a cruise and like every day has a themed outfit. They're like, you must wear white this day. You must dress disco this day. I say, no, I'm never going to see these people on the cruise again. If I'm not wearing white or disco clothes, too bad for them. I'm wearing what I've packed, which is as minimal things as possible.
And as far as checking your luggage, is there any, you know, if you still are checking, you know, unlike you, people who are checking their luggage,
yes,
they might have a connection. Any advice to ensure that you find your stuff at the baggage claim when you arrive?
Yes, I know it is stressful. I hear so many lost luggage stories. And so I will say, if you can avoid a layover, that's the number one way that your luggage gets lost, is in that kind of layover period. So if you can avoid the layover flight, definitely it is worth it if it's more expensive for most people. Sometimes you cannot avoid the layover and it's inevitable.
Especially if you're like from a small town, right?
Yes, I know. Yeah. So sometimes it is inevitable. If you do have to go the layover route, make sure that you do have in your carry-on all the things that you absolutely cannot afford to part with. So that's either expensive cameras and jewelry. That is items that are something that you can't pay for, you know, your favorite plushie from when you were a kid, you know, all those things. Well,
key things for babies too, like, you know, make sure extra diapers and carry out, like, you know, all the key things that if your luggage isn't there, you're not going to be freaking out upon landing.
And it's not just carry-on, but personal item, because a lot of people don't realize the flight attendants, if you have your carry-on roller bag, they can still force you to check your bag because there's not enough overhead bin space. And a lot of people say, you can't take my roller bag. I have my medication in there. So if it is something that you cannot part with, your passport, your, you know, plushie, your iPhone, your memory card, all of that, it needs to be something that can fit in your under seat. But then, you know, I always recommend AirTags are really helpful. I know an AirTag won't get your bag back, but it can at least allow you to track and narrow down where your AirTags are. My parents just went to Europe and I gave them an AirTag, and they had a multi-stop from St. Louis to New York to London to Budapest, Hungary. And there were 4 airports that they were in. Their luggage got lost and they didn't know at which of these 4 airports the luggage was. But with the AirTag, they can at least narrow it down, save themselves some phone calls, so they only have to harass the one airport where they know their luggage is at. Highly recommend AirTags.
You know, AirTags are great. And in fact, I think in dealing with the baggage authorities at the airlines now, they're like, well, do you have an AirTag in there? That might help us out.
Yes, definitely. So make sure you have that. Make sure you have your luggage marked with your name. And again, don't pack anything in your luggage that you couldn't afford to lose forever.
A lot of great advice there, Sally. Thank
I
you
love to travel.
Yeah, you love to travel. Appreciate the insights. I think we got through several dozen questions that we had there. So look forward to having you again on in the future. Any trips you're personally taking in the coming months?
Ooh, well, so I have become a recent cruise convert. I always was like, I would never take a cruise.
Yeah,
But
I'm in your prior, like I'm still in that category. Like I've never
yeah,
taken a cruise
I'm
in my life.
like, yeah, floating boat. I'm not sure. I don't want to feel trapped.
Plus, there's
But
all the like norovirus stories. I always feel like there's like the only time you hear the news about cruises is never positive.
yeah, that I also think is a little bit of a myth because cruises report illnesses really well and they report any, because they're
So
very
they're a victim
regulated.
of their own transparency.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And you never hear about these diseases transmitted in hotels or anything because they're not reporting that. So I will put that myth to bed. But I am doing my first ever European cruise. It'll be with Norwegian Cruise Line and it's 10 ports in 10 days. And I'm like a menace when I travel that I'm like, I want to see everything. I want to do 30,000 steps. I want to just crush it. So I'm excited about this itinerary because every single day is a new port. And so I think it's going to be like a
This
sampler.
is Mediterranean or this is
Yes,
Baltic?
Mediterranean.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're doing like some Greek islands, we're doing Croatia, we're doing Montenegro, and I'm like, this is going to be the sampler platter where I'm going to see which countries I like or which ports I like, and then I'll go back and spend more time after the cruise. And I think it'll be helpful because I waste so much time checking in and out of hotels, jumping on trains to transfer. So basically with this cruise, Norwegian will move me every day to a different port. So I don't need to mess around with the check-in and check-out. I can just like really maximize my time by actually seeing what the ports have to offer and not worrying about a hotel check-in. I'll keep you posted on how it is.
Keep us posted. Safe travel, Sally, and we'll have you back.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.